midnight.
I'm Rod Serling. You're listening to The Zero Hour.
Suspense. I'm the Whistler.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Who is it?
The Fat Man.
Presents The Man Called X.
The Mysterious Traveler. Another journey into the realm of the strange and terrifying. I hope you will enjoy the trip, that it will thrill you a little and chill you a little. So settle back, get a good grip on your nerves. Where are we going? You'll find out when we get there.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Drama and Theater, brought to you by Dwayne Old Time Radio. Drama and Theater features some of the best programs from the golden age of radio, including Escape, The Fat Man, Suspense, The Whistler, Zero Hour, Yours Truly Johnny Dollar, and many, many more. Before we start today's drama, if you enjoy what I'm doing, let me ask you to subscribe to my channel. Subscribing is 100% free, and you will receive notifications on new posts. Lastly, if you have a moment, write a short 1 or 2 sentence review or give a rating on your preferred podcast service. A positive review or rating would help me out a lot. And now, on to the drama. And thank you for your support, as always. Hope you enjoy. This week we will listen to the 3rd and 4th chapters from the Zero Hours series, from the 0 Hour story, Desperate Witness. As I said, this is the 3rd and 4th chapter from that storyline. There are conflicting dates for the episodes from the 0 Hour, but the 0 Hour aired from 1973 to 1974.
I'm Rod Serling. You're listening to The Zero Hour. Rest your eyes. Exercise your imagination. This week, Kenneth Fearing's study of a deadly obsession. Desperate Witness. Starring Richard Crenna Keenan Wynn. And Julie Adams. In Elliot Lewis's production of The 0 Hour.
The Mutual Broadcasting System presents The 0 Hour. Sponsored in part by
General Motors, Delco Electronics, and Sign-Off. This is the 0 Hour on Mutual Radio.
There's a nursery rhyme that refers to the mouse that ran up the clock. That clock is marking time, and time stops for no man. George Stroud, executive editor of Crime Waves magazine, will now conduct a search for a man who saw someone enter an apartment building the night of a murder. A desperate witness he alone knows to be himself. Our story will continue in a moment.
Absolutely. Lovely dress. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Brilliant.
Good old Harry. What a host. When Harry throws a party, nobody goes thirsty. Here, let me freshen up that drink. Good old Harry is such a great host. How come Bill and Jean had such a terrible fight?
I want to go home right now.
Well, it's a great party.
I don't care.
Such a drink.
No, I want to go home right now. Now
How come Bob had a little trouble driving home? And how come everybody who felt so good last night feels so bad this morning? Maybe good old Harry is not such a great host after all. Maybe good old Harry is a pusher, a neighborhood pusher. Harry pushes alcohol. So if you serve alcohol, please, don't be a pusher. And if you're a guest, don't let good old Harry or anyone else push you into drinking more than you want.
A public service message from this station and the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism.
If I picked the right kind of staff, twisted the investigation where I could, jammed it where I had to, pushed hard where it was safe, it might be a long time before anybody connected me with George Chester. Hopefully before that I could turn suspicion where it belonged, to the real murderer, Janet. Roy Cordett got them all together for me. I'd rely on Roy the heaviest. His office was next to mine. Also, he had the most analytical mind, so I wanted to keep my eye on him. I was behind my desk, playing it cool, the secure executive as they all trooped in.
Good morning,
Ed Olin, Don Klausmeyer, Leon Temple, Nat Sterling, and Roy.
I've briefed everybody, George, to drop whatever they're currently doing.
Fine. Thanks, Roy. Now, you're all being asked to take on a rather strange job. Has to be done quickly and quietly. I know I can rely on you. We've been given a blank check as far as the resources of the organization are concerned. If we need help on your particular assignments, just ask. Raid any department you need. Something special, come to me or to Roy here, who's second in command.
What's it about?
We're looking for somebody, Leon.
Oh.
Right now, we'll call him X. We don't know much about him. His name may be George Chester. It's possible he's in advertising. That'll be your assignment, Nat. Combing ad agencies, clubs, PR offices, newspapers, etc., etc., etc. Leon, check all real estate registers, tax records, public utilities, phone books of cities within, say, 400 miles for a George Chester.
Yeah.
Take all the people you need to help you.
I've got it.
Now, all we've got is a name, and we're not even sure of that. We haven't even got a good description of him. Just say he's of average height, say 5'9" to 11, average build, probably between 140 and 190.
That's not much to go on.
Well, he's apparently a regular of a place on 3rd Avenue called Gill's. He was supposedly there last Saturday afternoon with a woman that we know to be a good-looking blonde. That's all we know about her. Now, that'll be your job, Ed. Find this joint, whatever it is, and when you do, stay there until our Mr. X comes into it. Now, on the same evening, our subject went into an antique shop, also on 3rd Avenue. That'll be your gig, Don.
All you've told us about this man took place last Saturday. Wasn't that the night Pauline Dulles was killed? She's connected with Janet. He was in Washington. Is that what this is about?
No connection. Not as far as I know. It's purely a big-time business scandal that Hagen himself and a few others have been digging into. Now it's due to break.
Yeah, well, I just thought it's quite a coincidence.
No.
Do we make inquiries about the blonde woman who was with this guy?
Yeah, you'll all have to do that. But we're not looking for the woman or any other outside person. It's the man we want. Only the man. All right?
Yeah.
No more questions?
Sure.
I suppose you intellectual tramps get out of here and get to work.
Okay. Bye.
They were gone, except Roy. His was the sharpest, most analytical mind. My greatest hazard. I could feel the wheels in his head turning. I waited while he walked around the desk, then crossed to the wall, facing it, hands thrust into his pockets. He leaned against the wall, staring at the carpet.
George, this is a crazy affair. I can't help feeling Don hit the nail on the head.
How do you mean?
There's a curious connection there, the fact that all of this happened last Saturday.
I don't understand.
Well, I don't mean it has any connection with Pauline Dulles' murder. Of course it hasn't. That'd be a little too obvious. But I can't help thinking there's something. I don't know what. Something happened last week on Friday or Saturday, perhaps while Janet was in Washington, that would really explain why we're looking for this mysterious art-collecting stranger at this particular moment and in such a hurry. What do you think?
Sounds logical.
There's a rumor that Janet Enterprises is in real financial trouble. That's why he went to Washington. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Well, it's confidential. Don't ask me how I learned of it, but Janet could be fighting a buyout or a merger.
He was standing against the wall, and I was suddenly aware of the picture above his head as though it screamed at me. My whole staff out looking for a man who collected Pattersons? Well, the Patterson stared right back at me. It had hung on my wall so long I no longer saw it. I'd bought at the Lewis Galleries 2 years back, a profile of two faces showing only the brow, eyes, nose, lips, chins, facing each other in confrontation. In style, unmistakably Patterson. The artist called it Study in Fury.
I keep thinking the man we're looking for could very well be tied to the Janet Donahue group.
Janet Donahue?
Yeah, off the record, they're the ones trying to break Janet Enterprises. Think I ought to, on the side, follow up on that?
Good idea. Good idea, Roy. Hell of a good hunch. Follow it up and stick with it. He was hooked for now on a false lead. I held my breath as he moved from the wall, but he didn't glance at the Patterson painting. Closed the door and went back to his own office. When he was gone, I sat for a long time, feeling the aftershock and beads of perspiration all over me. That painting staring at me all the time I had given orders to find me. It was dangerous, but it would have to stay there. No one had noticed it, but if I moved it, its absence would cry out like a banshee. Now it would have to stay there on the wall, even though at any moment someone might make the connection. I'd always liked that painting. Now it was a threat. And that Patterson I'd taken home, my wife had seen it.
I love you, Daddy. He brought me to the circus once. I love my daddy more than everything. My daddy is sweet. My daddy is regular. My daddy is skinny.
Sometimes when I'm riding in the car with him, he goes so fast I'm sort of scared.
Slow down, Daddy. And you might skid and drive the car off the road. Why are you going so fast, Daddy? When Daddy drives, I worry because he has lots of crashes. A policeman can come right around the corner, and my dad might get arrested.
I'm scared.
Oh, if you're worried about him. I get scared because he goes so fast.
If you don't care about your own safety, remember that those who love you do. Please, slow down. This message was brought to you by the General Motors Corporation.
We'll return to our story in a moment.
Here's a tip from your Better Business Bureau. Spring and summer are the seasons when most people plan vacations and they go flying off all over the place. And, of course, they bring back a peck of precious pictures. Many camera stores are beginning to paste notices to their counters warning people that airline security measures may ruin photographic film in checked baggage. Some anti-hijacking devices used to check baggage for possible concealed weapons utilize X-rays, which will fog your film whether or not it's been exposed. Therefore, one of the best ways to protect film while traveling is to place it in a strong, clear plastic bag and hand carry it. Even though the film may be clearly visible in the bag, make sure that the airline boarding personnel are aware of the film so that it isn't accidentally subjected to X-rays. This has been a consumer tip from your Better Business Bureau.
Once I'd got over the initial shock of having dispatched an army of legmen to track myself down, I began to feel more secure. I had one great advantage. I alone knew where each one of them was at all times. I could evaluate the bits and pieces they brought me, could divert their direction, keep them from comparing notes, and discredit anything that got too close for comfort. I'd be under the big clock from now on. It was a desperate race between the police, Janet, and myself. Would the police get to me before they got to Janet? Could I get to Janet before Hagen got to me? I sent Mafferson to cover the police. I couldn't send one of my own staff. They were too crime-wise. Mafferson was an intellectual on Future Way's staff. Send him to cover a murder story, he'd end up writing a philosophical piece about prison reform. He'd been on staff 10 years, probably hadn't spoken 100 consecutive words to anybody. Anything Mafferson dug up would be for my ears only. And that's what I wanted. He came into my office, his plump face, as usual, vague. His expression an eternal puzzlement.
They took me off my assignment, and I was doing a piece on molecular structure.
Emery, I'm involved in a special outside job. The whole staff's working on it. But at the same time, one of the most sensational murders of the year has occurred. Pauline Delos. You must have read the newspaper account.
Oh, I believe I glanced at it. Oh, isn't she, Jenna's lady friend?
Wasn't she? Right. Well, this special assignment's taking all our time around here, but we can't let crime waves be left at the post. We can't let a big story like the Delos murder get away from us.
Well, I'm sorry. I don't understand where I'd fit in.
Look, the usual policy would be to break it, give it a big play, 20 or 30 leg men. This time, since my guys are busy, we'll do the reverse. I want you to go in there quietly, alone.
You want me to cover it?
A totally different approach. Fresh. You'll bring it something new, sensitive, not the usual expose. I want you to keep this assignment to yourself because I still haven't sold it upstairs. You know what I mean?
Well, a crime story, that's so out of my experience.
Start at Center Street, Homicide Bureau. Pick up everything as and when it happens. Phone it in to me, and me only, everything. I want to be kept up to date on every phase of the Delos story.
Well, now, will this be all right with Hagen? You know, he put me on future waves.
Don't worry now. I'll fix it with Hagen. And I'll fix it with Janeth, too. That's the beauty of a monolithic organization. The right hand doesn't suspect what the left hand's doing. By the time Hagen found out about Mafferson, I'd either be in the clear, or it'd be too late for me anyway. I rode down to the garage, got into my car, and drove off, intending to go straight home and get rid of that painting I'd bought. But I turned down a side street, and I found myself heading toward Pauline's apartment. It was the first I'd been there since that night. All this energy spent trying to plot my own survival, and I hadn't really stopped to think about her. The image of that beautiful neck, broken, and perfect body, lifeless. I had to pull over to the curb, pull myself together, force my mind to look for a weakness, a flaw in Janeth's alibi. There had to be one. I went back over Saturday night, every step. I'd just taken Pauline home. My car's parked around the corner. I let her off. I'm not going into the lobby. So far as anyone in the building knows, I don't exist. I'm a distance off. I see Janeth drive up. He gets out of his car. He catches up with Pauline. He goes in with her. And what did he do after that? He killed her. Then he had to get away. But he'd sent his chauffeur on. How'd he get to Steve Hagen's? I drove the logical route from Pauline's to Hagen's. Saw two nearby cab stands. Janeth could have used one of them if he'd taken a taxi to Hagen's. Unless he found a cruising cab. He certainly wouldn't have been so stupid as to pick one up at Pauline's door. The farthest cab stand was the likeliest. I'd begin there, then I'd try the nearer. No, it was dangerous. Because cabbies talk to cops. No, not yet. I'd have to be careful and wait. I got back to my office just as Roy called in the first report. Hello?
It's Roy, George. Listen, I'm at Gill's Tavern with Ed Orland. It's a nut house. You know, this guy's got a museum here that looks like...
So what'd you find out?
Well, the bartender, who's the chief lunatic around here, described our man as intelligent, eccentric.
You sound like you don't agree.
Eccentric, yes, but only a moron would come into a dump like this and spend hours talking to the guy who runs this menagerie.
Is that all?
Well, physical description we have doesn't seem far wrong. But nothing to add to it except he's brown-haired, clean-cut.
Anything on the blonde?
Nothing.
It certainly isn't much, is it?
Well, wait. Our man is unquestionably a lush.
Oh?
4 or 5 years ago, he was in here every night. Had to be sent home in a cab. At that time, he was a newspaper man. Bartender never heard of him working in advertising. Before he was a newspaper man, he ran a tavern upstate somewhere with his wife. That's all we've got. So what should Ed do? Come back to the office?
No. Our man was in there 2 days ago. He might turn up any minute. No, have Ed work on the bartender. Psychoanalyze him for more details. Have a few drinks with him.
This kook's a human blotter, and he's got some screwy game.
Well, Ed can get drunk with him, but not too drunk. And tell him to try some of the other customers. What's the address and phone number there? I felt I'd pulled it off pretty well. That'd keep things on ice for a while. Eccentric, huh? Moron and lush. I never saw that when I looked in the mirror. I touched my shirt. It was soaked with nervous sweat.
If you're in the market for a new Chevrolet, Pontiac, Buick, Oldsmobile, or Cadillac, you can make it a real sensation in stereo sound when you order a Delco sound system factory installed. AM with stereo tape, AM-FM stereo, and AM-FM stereo with 8-track tape are just some of the systems available. Delco stereo. We think you deserve it on a GM car.
Delco Electronics is the sound of General Motors.
Sinus flares up. Sometimes your whole face aches. When you need occasional help, get Sign-Off tablets, the sinus medicine. Sign-Off works with a full dose of pure aspirin for sinus headache, plus a sinus drainer for congestion. That's how Sign-Off helps sinus pain while you drain. Remember, for best relief and safety, take Sign-Off only as directed. Sineoff. The sinus medicine in the bright red box.
The Zero Hour continues after this.
जी हाँ, ये खानदानी मंसूबा बंदी का मरकज है.
Mais oui, c'est le centre de planning familial.
Yes, this is the family planning center.
There are family planning centers in more than 100 countries today. The women who come to these centers can't afford to go to private doctors, but they want to plan their children, when they're going to have them, and how many they're going to have. The trouble is, there aren't enough centers. Just in the United States, there are nearly 5 million women who have no way of getting modern family planning help. And that's nothing compared with the world problem. Some countries don't have enough family planning centers. Some don't have any at all. This year, again, many women will have babies not because they want to, but because they have no choice. Sad for them. Sad for the world. With family planning help, these women, too, will have babies only when they choose. So that all the people of the world may have this freedom of choice, support Planned Parenthood.
I was getting home later and leaving earlier. My wife, concerned with being cook, nurse, and handholder, our daughter had tonsillitis, hadn't seemed to notice that the painting was no longer in the dining room. I hoped she'd forgotten it. I had it stashed in the downstairs closet behind all our raincoats.
George, you're not leaving without your breakfast.
Yeah, I have to, hon. I'll call you.
Darling, I don't like the way you look at all. They're working you too hard. Try to get home earlier, dear.
The worry about how close I was to losing my family if the truth came out rode into town with me. Roy wanted me in his office, which had taken on the look of command headquarters for World War III. A big blackboard covered half a wall. Cross-reference charts were propped up on desks, tables. I didn't see Leon Temple right away. He was behind a 6-foot chart.
What do you think of it?
You're doing a thorough job, Roy.
I've got our Mr. X charted 10 ways from Sunday, all cross-indexed. Reports have begun coming in. See, under background, he may or may not be in advertising. He used to be a newspaper man. Once operated an upstate tavern resort with his wife. Now, that's just a matter of checking every tavern license back as far as necessary.
Well, it's a start, Roy.
Start? More than that. Leon just worked up a report on the Van Barth. I was just going to put it up on the board. Read it to him, Leon.
Sure. It was established that the man in question, whom we know as George Chester, was in the Van Barth Lounge on Saturday night last, sometime between 9:30 and 10. He was carrying an unframed oil painting, which he did not check, and was overheard talking to his female companion about what the painting should be named. The woman with him was one Pauline Ellis.
Ellis? Are you sure of that?
No doubt about it, George.
Oh, sure.
Leon checked the waiter, bartender, checkroom girl, all three. Identified her from pictures published in the paper. Now, Doesn't this alter the whole character of the assignment?
Do the police know Dulles was in there Saturday night?
Of course. Everybody in the place reported it once they saw the papers.
I'm asking Leon.
Oh, yes, they know.
And do the police know that we're looking for the man who was with her?
Well, I didn't give them any information. I followed your exact instructions.
So that's it. Just that they were there.
Oh, no. There's evidence. When they left the cocktail lounge of the Van Barth, our subject left something behind.
What? What did he leave?
Subject's handkerchief. I've got it here in the envelope. The lady spilled her drink.
I see that.
I wouldn't touch it, George. We may be able to raise a fingerprint.
From a handkerchief? I doubt that. Anyway, if they can, I imagine it already has plenty. The waiters, the cashiers, yours. One more set won't matter.
Well, even without fingerprints, it can probably be traced. There's a laundry mark on it.
Yeah, well, I'll send it to the lab, Roy. You go on with what you're doing. At least I'd publicly handled the handkerchief. Back in my office, I closed the door of my desk on it. Just as Don Klosmeyer came in.
I've got some interesting information, George.
Any luck with the painting?
Yeah, real luck. You know, I found the artist.
Oh?
She lives in a loft, paradise for rats and termites. Got 4 kids, never was married. The first of the women's livers.
That's all very interesting. What's it got to do with our man?
Just this. She's the customer who bid unsuccessfully for her own picture that night. A friend saw her canvas in the shop window and told her. She tried to buy it back, but she'd been broke for years and couldn't match our guy's bid. But she did give a detailed description of him. You know, the artist's eye and all that.
Let's have it.
Yeah, I got the old girl on tape, had it transcribed. Here, let me read it to you.
All right.
I quote Patterson. The bum that outbid me for my own paintings was a smug, self-satisfied creep just like 10 million other rubber-stamped sub-executives. Brown hair, line of gray at the temple, brown eyes, high cheekbones, symmetrical lean features. Face looks like he'd scrubbed and shaved it 5 times a day. Has one of those $10 hairstylings just over the edge of the ear and curling at the nape of the neck. More establishment than hippie. He's 37, 38, weighs between 160 and 165, 5 feet 10 and a half. Gray tweed suit, wide red and black necktie striped with white, wears a wide gold wedding band. A good deal of an exhibitionist. Imagines he's Omar Sharif, and that's what he plays at being. The woman with him was beautiful, if you like lesbians in standard Park Avenue models. He knows pictures, especially the works of L. Patterson, which he doubtless collects, but only for their snob appeal. Otherwise, he's a totally obnoxious man, unquote. Oh, she didn't miss much, huh?
May or may not be a good description. Her opinion, a little biased.
You know, George, when I was poking around that studio loft she lives in, looking at acres of her pictures, they all had kind of the same feel. And it reminded me of something I've seen somewhere else quite recently.
I was staring straight over his head at Louise Patterson's Study in Fury on the wall behind him.
The only trouble is, I can't remember what it is or where I saw it.
Well, it'll come back to you. Don't worry about it. I'll see you tomorrow. I took him by the arm and ushered him out so he wouldn't have a chance to turn and look at the painting on the wall. I thought of its mate, the temptation of Judas, in the downstairs closet at home behind our raincoats. It could be discovered and easily if they ever caught up with me. If anyone ever got that far, I was finished anyway. Dennis and Steve Hagen would take care of that.
You are listening to Mutual's presentation of The Zero Hour.
I'd like you to ask yourself a personal question. What do you feel when you meet a handicapped person? Pity? Admiration? Fear? Are you from the school that teaches a stiff upper lip, try harder, fight, don't let anything stand in your way, do it? Do what? Learn a skill? Go to school? Develop confidence, self-respect? Then get turned down by a landlord who doesn't believe you'll pay the rent? By an employer who never hired the handicapped before and who isn't going to risk it now? If we don't believe in the handicapped, then how are they going to believe in themselves?
Unless we recognize that they're human beings with feelings, with skills, with a sense of responsibility, then we're adding a handicap that they can't overcome. Let's stop handicapping the handicapped. This public service message brought to you on behalf of the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare and the Advertising Council.
It was last summer when I was 18. And I was in love with a girl named Kathy. Kathy was 18, too. It was the happiest summer of my life. I had never been that happy before. I know I'll never be that happy again. It was warm and beautiful, and so we bought a few bottles of wine and drove into the country. We drank the wine and held each other, laughed. It must have been the stars and the wine and the warm wind. Nobody else was on the road. The top was down, and we were singing, and I didn't even see the tree until I hit it. Kathy died. I killed Kathy.
Stop driving drunk. Stop killing each other. Write to Drunk Driver, Department Y, Box 1969, Washington, D.C., for more information on drinking and driving. A public service message on behalf of the U.S. Department of Transportation.
Tomorrow at this time, rest your eyes and listen here to this week's continuing study in suspense, Desperate Witness. I'm Rod Serling.
Today's episode brought to you in part by General Motors, Delco Electronics, and Sign-Off. This is the Zero Hour on Mutual Radio.
You have been listening to The Zero Hour, a presentation of the Mutual Broadcasting System in association with Hollywood Radio Theater. Heard every weekday at this time. Rod Serling is your host. Zero Hour is produced and directed by Elliott Lewis. The Hollywood Radio Theater theme was played by Ferranti and Teicher and is now available on United Artists Records and Tapes. Hugh Douglas speaking. Tune in tomorrow, and once again,
rest your eyes and listen here
to The Zero Hour.
This is the Mutual Broadcasting System.
I'm Rod Serling. You're listening to The Zero Hour. Rest your eyes. Exercise your imagination. This week, Kenneth Fearing's study of a deadly obsession. Desperate Witness. Starring Richard Crenna Keenan Wynn. And Julie Adams. In Elliott Lewis's production of The Zero Hour.
The Mutual Broadcasting System presents The Zero Hour. Sponsored in part by
General Motors and Quaker State Motor Oil. This is the Zero Hour on Mutual Radio.
George Stroud, on orders from on high, is leading a manhunt for someone he knows to be a witness before the fact to murder. It's only a matter of time, and time cannot be bought. Not like the painting hanging in the office, or the one for which he paid $50 to a junk dealer the night of the murder. For George Stroud, time is running short. In a moment, part 4 of Desperate Witness, right after this word.
Hello, I'm Johnny Cash, and I've been around this great country of ours enough to know how important it is to get as much education as you can while you're young. If you want to start college or vocational school, this may be your chance. The government wants to give you some money if you have financial need. Can you believe that? Well, it's true. Look into a new program called Basic Grants to see if you qualify. Hurry on over to the county agent, post office, or nearest school for more information and an application form. A basic grant won't give you all the money you need to make it through college or vocational training, but it'll help you get on the road. It could be the most important road you'll ever walk in your entire life. And if you don't feel like walking, just write your name and address on the back of a postcard and mail it to Basic Grants, Post Office Box 84, Washington, D.C., 20044. That's Basic Grants, Post Office Box 84, Washington, D.C., 20044.
I called Steve Hagen. I would have preferred to see his face when I told him our search led us to a dead woman. But his secretary had said he wasn't available. So I settled for just hearing his reaction.
Yes, George?
Steve, the woman with our man that night was Pauline Dulles. Steve, are you there?
You better come upstairs, George.
They were both there when I walked across those carpeted acres. Steve Hagen seated at his desk, Janice standing behind him. If I thought my face reflected tension, Janice was controlled hysteria. He nodded to me, then he turned and he looked out the window.
George, I've imparted your information to Mr. Janeth. He's naturally disturbed. But he agrees with me that there's absolutely no significance in the fact that Pauline Dulles was the man's companion that night. What we want, what we have to have, is the name and whereabouts of the man himself. That's all we're after.
I can't buy that there's no connection.
Well, you have our assurance, Mr. Janet's and mine. You see, we've had reason to believe that Pauline knew this go-between, so it's not unnatural that she would have been out with him. Perhaps we should have told you.
Well, perhaps you should have.
Listen, Pauline Dulles is a blind alley. Her murder is one story. This is different, unrelated. Now, let's look at some of these other leads a little more closely. We're still checking the list of upstate liquor licenses suspended or not renewed with the board, aren't we?
No, that's a tall order. There are hundreds. The list is being fed straight to me. If I get anything, you'll know immediately.
You seen the story Newsways ran about this Patterson woman?
It's too early for results.
Our spread is going to put that woman on the map. Someone is certain to recognize that Judas painting from our description. Our evaluation of it is priceless, is sure to locate it. It's my hunch that picture alone will nail our man to the wall.
Those bars, art galleries, and so on.
They're all being covered, Mr. Jones.
Exactly. And why hasn't our man shown by now? No one suddenly abandons his habitual routine of life, not without good reason. Why?
He may be the one who murdered Dulles. In that case, he's not making himself conspicuous. Though he knows he's in fast company, he knows the score, and he's gone to ground. Right where he is, so the same thing won't happen to him.
You mean he may believe himself to be in danger?
He knows somebody's playing for keeps. Why shouldn't he be worried? Maybe he saw the killer, can identify him. He's afraid to come forward, knowing he's in for the same.
He's keeping undercover, staying away from all the places he always went before. How many people in the organization, Stroud, know about this particular job?
What do you mean?
Right here, Janeth Enterprises. How many? I'd have guessed.
Well, with 53 people now working on this assignment, I'd say everyone knows about it. The entire 2,000. Why?
Nothing. For a second, I thought I had something. All right. I guess that reports on everything. It's still nothing.
You think I missed a bet somewhere?
Just bear down on it, that's all.
I shall. And now that we've decided the murder and our particular guy belong together, there are a lot more lines we can follow.
What lines?
Well, for one thing, Mr. Janeth, I'll have some men cover all cab stands in the neighborhood of Pauline Dulles' apartment.
Cab stands? Why?
On the night of her death, only a few minutes after it, in fact, somebody took a cab away from that vicinity and couldn't help being rather noticeable. The driver will remember.
I don't follow that.
It's quite simple. Our subject took Pauline to Gill's, then to a number of antique shops, then to the Van Barth. Now, why wouldn't he take her home? Of course he did. Our timing concurs with the police's. He took her home, then he had to leave. The first and most obvious line to follow is that he left in a taxi.
Perhaps he had his own car.
Perhaps he did.
He may have walked, taken a bus.
Right. Maybe he did none of these things. But it's my hunch we'll discover he did take a cab. We'll locate the driver. We'll find out where he drove him. And that'll close the whole assignment. The stricken look on Janeth's face that came and went screamed his guilt, reassured me that I was right. Janeth had taken a cab that night, and it was my only hope of nailing him with the murder. Later that day, Janeth went home under doctor's care. The word was he had a strep throat. My bet was that he had a chill brought on by seeing himself with a number on his chest. But I had a chill, too. Brought on by the sure knowledge that if they'd been out to get me before, they'd stop at nothing to cut me down now.
Hello. Now, let me tell you about myself. I used to be a drunk, a chronic drunk driver. In the 10 years between my first arrest and having my license revoked, I racked up 19 major traffic violations. I caused 6 serious accidents, injured 3 people beside myself, and had my license suspended twice. I was still driving and drinking. And then, one night I was driving home after work, and I'd had a few, and I hit this kid on a bicycle. He died before they could get him any help. He was just 11, a little younger than my oldest boy. I'm living with that now. I was too drunk to see him then, but I can see him now. And I remember.
This message was brought to you by the General Motors Corporation.
We'll return to our story in a moment.
I'm Lucille Maness, an unsuccessful big businesswoman, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about my unsuccessful business. I was the co-founder of this women's book club, but we ran into a little trouble. We had all kinds of problems, so I called SCORE. That's the Service Corps of Retired Executives. They're retired executives who
volunteer to help small businesses. I went over and discovered Lucille was in deep trouble. I made several simple business suggestions. I also strongly recommended the club seek incorporation with a well-established women's magazine until its membership increased sufficiently.
Unfortunately, one of my associates really didn't like the idea of a man giving us advice, so she wrote herself a check with the remainder of what we had left in the treasury and took off. Well, Mr. Krause came back to help again.
A man who knows how to solve problems likes to keep solving them.
Volunteer for SCORE. SCORE is one part of action. Action is doing something.
There is something you can do. Get into action.
I took 3 good recent photographs of Earl Janeth out of the morgue. But I didn't leave the office, even when 5 o'clock rolled around. I stayed, pretending to be bogged down, correlating all the information that had been given to me. By the time I left the office, I really needed a drink. The idea of going into a bar now made me very nervous. I got to the second cab stand, which I figured to be the most likely, about the same hour that Janeth would have taken the cab that Saturday night. I showed Janeth's pictures to the only cabbie waiting at the stand. He didn't want to know who I was or why I was asking.
No. Wait, let me see that other picture. No, I'm sure I never hacked this guy, but maybe my partner. We owned a cab together. He worked Saturday nights. He could have drove him, you know.
I gave him 3 things. A picture of Janeth, a $20 bill, and the phone number of the office with instructions to talk only to me. The proposition was backed up by another 20 in the offing if he got me the right information. I felt more relaxed for the first time in days when I got home. My family was asleep. I had a drink, and I took the temptation of Judas painting out of the downstairs closet. My intent was to destroy it, and I couldn't bring myself to do it. It was a work of art, and to destroy a work of art is murder of another kind. So I carried it into the cellar, and I stashed it face to the wall behind the furnace. The horn of the school bus and a small female cyclone swept through the lower rooms of the house, gathering school bag, crayons, picture book, lunchbox, and a hastily scribbled note from her mother explaining her tonsillitis. Her mother and I stood there in the warm sunlight for a moment. The picture of an ordinary, normal, untroubled family. I waved the bus off until I could no longer see it, and I kept waving. I could feel my face flocking into deep lines that could hold rainwater.
Are you all right, George?
No, a headache, that's all. Just a headache.
George, something is bothering you. I can feel it.
You get off my back. Oh, I'm sorry, honey. I'm sorry. It's just it's a lousy mood. You know how it is. It's deadline week.
That's okay. You know, you forgot to bring home a Newsways last night.
Never mind. I'll bring one home tonight without fail. In fashion, if you like.
Oh, never mind the Newsways. I bought one yesterday.
Oh?
You know there's an article in it about this Louise Patterson.
Yeah, I glanced at it.
Fabulous. Just what you've been saying for years. Here, listen. With all the force of a major explosion, by grace of a new talent suddenly shooting meteor-like across the otherwise turgid skies of the contemporary art world.
Overwritten.
There's more. Louise Patterson may view her models through a microscope, but the brush she wields is gargantuan. Isn't that grand?
Grand.
Well, they're recognizing her talent. Don't be so critical just because they use different words than you would. At least they admit she's a great painter. Well, for heaven's sake, George, don't pretend you aren't pleased. You must have 7 or 8 Pattersons. Now they're all valuable.
Well, I have to run. I'll drive in. Or do you need the car?
Wait. I want you to hear the rest of this. This week, interest in the art world centered on the whereabouts of one of Patterson's lost masterpieces, her famed Judas, admittedly the most highly prized canvas, etc., etc. This is the part. Depicting 2 huge hands extending a coin, a consummate study in flaming yellow, red, and tawny brown. This composition was widely known some years ago, then it quietly dropped from view, and so on. Well?
Neat, but not gaudy. They make it sound like a rainbow at midnight.
That's not what I'm driving at. Would you know anything about that picture?
Well, why should I?
Didn't I see an unframed painting you brought home over a week ago? The night Georgia came down with tonsillitis, didn't I?
Oh, that, yeah. Well, honey, that wasn't an original. That was only a copy.
Oh, what became of it? It was here in the dining room. I searched everywhere.
I took it to the office. Why do you think those plumbers who call themselves writers got such an accurate description of the original? Bye, sweetie. I'll have to step on it. Call you this afternoon. Mafferson met me coming into the building. We rode up together. Fortunately, the elevator was empty except for the 2 of us. But Mafferson didn't want to talk about what he'd learned at police headquarters. He had another worry. His job.
You think we'll all be fired?
Who gave you that idea?
Well, I ran into this fellow at breakfast. I always stop off at Schraff's in the morning. Fred Steichel's his name. Managing editor of Jeanette Donahue. Never did like that man, and he's even more obnoxious now that he's in a position of power. He was almost as insulting as the night when I tried to call you a week ago Saturday, the night of the murder, as it turns out. I couldn't reach you, so I called Steve Hagen. Steichel says our magazines are going to fold.
Wait a minute. What time did you call, Steve?
10:30, 10:45. It's strange, isn't it? Police records say that's about the time she was killed.
And you talked to Steve Hagen? He was home?
Yes. At his apartment. Talked to Janet, too.
Janet?
Yeah. What's strange about that? He'd been there all evening, came direct from the airport. They were having a business meeting and told me not to worry about my job.
I wanted to yell. Mafferson backing Janet's alibi. I had to find that cab driver. My mind was racing with a need. We were in my office, but I couldn't remember reaching it. Mafferson was dutifully giving me his police report, and I wasn't listening until I heard the word...
Albany.
What?
I said the police know Dulles was out of town from last Friday until late Saturday. They found out where she was from a book of matches in her apartment. Came from a nightclub in Albany that doesn't circulate its matches. And in the course of a routine checkup with the Albany hotels, they found out where she'd stayed and what name she'd used.
Oh, really?
Incidentally, the police know all about this job you've been doing here, and they're convinced the man you're looking for and the man with Dulles last weekend in Albany is one and the same. Does that help or hinder our story?
Go on.
Oh, that's about all. They're sending a man up there this afternoon or tomorrow morning with a lot of photographs to check out with the nightclub, the hotel, and elsewhere. I told you they had the Dulles woman's address book, didn't I? They've been rounding up pictures of every man she knew, and most likely the Albany guy is one of them. Do you follow me?
Yeah, I follow you.
They know from the general description they got over the phone from the hotel personnel that the man most definitely was not Janeth. At the hotel, they were registered as Mr. and Mrs. Andrew Phelps Guillaume. Oh, by the way, your name was in her address book. Did you know that?
My wife and I met her at a couple of parties.
Now, if I may digress from these facts to a more philosophical evaluation...
You're doing a good job, Emery. Don't evaluate. Just keep compiling facts. Oh, by the way, is the department looking for a photograph of me?
Oh, they already have one. Off your driver's license application. The man they're sending upstate has quite a collection, 50 or 60 photographs.
I see.
Now, I can go to Albany with him if you like. You know, expedite things.
No. I want you to start working up that story. I could feel the big clock's hands spinning, hurling me faster and faster. Any minute now, it would tell me my time was up.
Judy, do you remember what I told you about all that high-speed turnpike driving you're doing now and all that power equipment on your new car?
Yes, Caleb?
About how they can make your engine so hot that the oil thins down so it may not protect your engine?
Yes, Caleb.
Now, how do you tell if your oil's too hot?
Just watch the temperature gauge.
Nope. That just shows how hot the radiator fluid is.
Oh, I know. When the oil's too hot, that little red light goes on.
Nope. That just tells you the oil pressure's too low.
Well, how do I tell if my oil's too hot?
Fact is, you can't.
Then how do I know my engine's protected?
Make sure you're using quality oil like Quaker State. Quaker State's specially made to stand up to high engine heat so it can keep right on protecting like an oil's supposed to.
Is that the reason you always recommend Quaker State?
That's one reason.
Quaker State your car to keep it running young.
The Zero Hour continues after this.
Josephine, open up. It's me, Napoleon Bonaparte, Emperor of all France, much of the civilized world, and Louisiana if the deal falls through.
Quick, Pierre, hide in the closet. Napoleon must not find you here. Come in, Nappy.
Ah, Josephine, I had to see you.
Napoleon, my dearest heart, what are you doing here? I thought you were at Waterloo.
I was, but it ended early. What is that? I smell cigarette smoke. You know I hate you to smoke.
I didn't. I don't. I started again.
Aha! The smoke coming from that closet. Come out of there, you scoundrel, and on cart.
It was only in there to pick up the dry cleaning.
Take that, you filthy escargot.
This World History lesson was brought to you by your American Cancer Society, which says smoking can be injurious to your health.
Touché!
In more ways than one.
The two lines of investigation, the organizations and the police, were drawing steadily together like pincers. I could feel them closing. I told myself it was just a vast machine, and the machine was blind. But I hadn't fully realized its crushing weight and power. I returned to my desk from a lunch I could not remember having tasted.
Oh, Mr. Stroud, here's that list of non-renewed licenses from out-of-town taverns you asked for. It's from 10 years back.
Oh, thanks, Lucille.
I haven't had a chance to go through and alphabetize them yet if you want to leave them with me.
No, later, thanks. One of them would have my name on it. And my wife's. I carried them to my desk, figuring I'd feed them to the paper shredder. But Roy's door into my office was open. He was standing in it. For the moment, I consigned the file folder to my bottom drawer.
Been meaning to ask you, George, did you send that handkerchief to the lab to check possible fingerprints and have the laundry mark run down?
No, I'm sorry, Roy. I forgot.
You give it to me, will you? I'll do it right away.
Yeah, sure. Got it right here on my desk.
Oh, and Hagen called. I want you to come right up.
These conferences with Hagen had daily become longer, more frequent, more bitter. It was cold comfort to have a clear understanding of the abyss that Hagen and Janeth, particularly Janeth, saw yawning before them. I wasn't thinking about Janeth, but about myself when I opened Hagen's door. found myself staring at a photographic blow-up of the painting I'd hidden in my cellar at home.
We're going to run it on the cover of Newsways next issue with a follow-up story on the artist.
But the cover, is she that significant?
She's not. We have our own reasons for running the story. The first article on the artist generated a lot of reader interest. Now we run this lead. Priceless painting disappears. That'll pull our man out of the woodwork. Somebody will turn him in. Someone who knows he has the picture.
Hagen, who hadn't touched anything as plebeian as layout in the 15 years he'd risen to the top of Janet's empire, was meticulously laying out the copy on his desk. I stared over his shoulder at a 4x6 photo displaying one wall of a Louise Patterson exhibition 9 years back in the Miller Gallery. In the middle, surrounded by 4 other paintings, was the 2 hands of the Temptation of Judas. But it was another painting that grabbed my throat and squeezed the air out of me. 2 faces, 2 profiles facing one another in confrontation, called Study in Fury. This painting at that very moment was hanging, as it had for 2 years, on the wall of my office, just 6 floors below. By the time Newsways went to press, anyone who'd wandered in and out of my office since this insanity began was sure to make the connection. If I lasted until Newsways went to press.
George, what the devil's wrong? This thing has drifted more than a week. Why haven't we found our man?
I just shook my head and walked out. By the time I got back to my office, they were all there. Roy, Leon Temple, Phil Best, a couple of other leg men. It was apparent the second I stepped into the room that there'd been a break.
George, we've got him.
Where? Where is he?
Right here.
Here?
Go on, tell him, Leon.
Our man came into this building just a little while ago, right after lunch.
I don't understand. Why would he come in here? Who is he?
We don't know yet, but we've got him. Leon slipped some cash to the staff of the Van Bart, let them know there'd be more.
Incidentally, I need my expense account.
Will you skip the non-essentials, please?
What Leon's trying to tell you, George, is that the staff of the Van Bart have all been scouting around this district in their free hours. After all, the Van Bart's only 3 blocks from here. And one of their porters picked up our guy and followed him right into this building.
I couldn't get over Roy's eyes. Calm, unflappable Roy. And his eyes blazed with evangelical zeal. All of them, all the men in that room, lusting for blood like hunters who'd treat an animal. And I was the animal. I was saying things like, "Good boy, Leon, that's using your head, Roy." And all the while I wondered if my reflexes had stopped working. I uncrossed my knees with the pieces of me fall off one by one like the rusted, useless wheels and cogs of a worthless machine that has outlived its purpose.
In about 2 minutes, we'll have every door and exit covered.
You're certain that he's the man we're looking for?
The porter's positive. He saw him crossing the street, followed him a block, almost lost him at the light, but ran and caught up just as our Mr. X entered this building. And unfortunately, he got to the elevator before the Van Bart guy could alert us.
Oh, I see.
In addition to the porter, a night bartender from the Van Bart, waitress from Gill's, and the art dealer have all arrived.
Well, nothing to do now but wait, huh?
If he doesn't come out during the afternoon, we're sure to pick him up at 5:30 when the building empties.
It'll be jammed. We'll have to cover every inch of the main floor.
He's in the bag. We can't miss. Agree, George?
In the bag. And I'll wait it out right along with him. Stay here till we get him. If necessary, I'll sleep here all night. I'm not going to leave this office till we've got this all sewed up. Roy would know that if a man came into a building and didn't go out, he must logically still be inside. And this inescapable conclusion must eventually be followed by one, and only one, logical course of action. Sooner or later, my staff must go through the building, floor by floor, office by office, looking for the only man in it who never went home. That man would be me.
You are listening to Mutual's presentation of The Zero Hour.
I'm Roger Staubach. I'm not here to talk to you as quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, but as an ex-serviceman who'd rather have his head beaten in on the football field than practice his skills in another war. And that's why I'm rooting for the world's most successful peacekeeping team, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It's worked for nearly a quarter of a century. In that time, the 15 Atlantic nations that make up NATO have been building teamwork like never before. In Europe, historically the world's greatest trouble spot, they have helped keep the peace and develop economic cooperation. They have generated a game plan through which problems like arms control and pollution are being attacked. Believe me, it's needed. The world's been kicked around enough. Let's help strengthen the NATO team. NATO works. Something else might not.
This message was brought to you by the Atlantic Council of the United States.
Here's a tip from your Better Business Bureau. Properly cooked vegetables add interest and enjoyment as well as nutrition to a meal. Cooking only long enough to make the vegetable tender tends to preserve more flavor and better texture than prolonged cooking. And when you buy vegetables, demand freshness. Check the characteristic signs of freshness, such as bright, lively color and crispness. Handle produce carefully. Someone must pay for vegetables lost by rough handling, and in the long run, it'll probably be you. Incidentally, don't buy just because of low price. It doesn't pay to buy more vegetables than you can properly store in your refrigerator, or you can use without waste. Most vegetables can be stored for 2 to 5 days, and it's really penny foolish to buy fresh vegetables affected by decay. Because even if you do trim off the decayed area, rapid deterioration is likely to spread to the salvaged area. A few cents extra for vegetables in good condition is a good investment.
Tomorrow at this time, rest your eyes and listen here to this week's continuing study in suspense, Desperate Witness. I'm Rod Serling.
Today's episode brought to you in part by General Motors and Quaker State Motor Oil. This is the Zero Hour on Mutual Radio.
You have been listening to The Zero Hour, a presentation of the Mutual Broadcasting System in association with Hollywood Radio Theater. Heard every weekday at this time. Rod Serling is your host. Zero Hour is produced and directed by Elliot Lewis. The Hollywood Radio Theater theme was played by Ferranti and Teicher and is now available on United Artists Records and Tapes. Hugh Douglas speaking. Tune in tomorrow, and once again,
rest your eyes and listen here
to The Zero Hour.
This is the Mutual Broadcasting System.
Thank you for listening to and showing your support for my podcast. If you would like to receive notifications of when new episodes are posted, please subscribe to my channel. Subscriptions are 100% free, and they really help me get an idea of how I'm doing. You can also go to my website where you can listen to all of my podcasts for free, and you can also download episodes for free. The website is otr.duane.media. There is also donation information on there if you want to show your support or become a patron. You can email me at info@otr.duane.media. I'm also on Instagram at duane.otr. Well, hope you enjoyed, and until next time, stay safe, wish you well, and as always, peace.